This is a story in my neck of the woods in California, which is sometimes people think that California is some progressive utopia. And here's the reality, folks. I don't think there is a progressive utopia in the United States. I'm pretty sure there's not. I've lived in the Midwest. I've lived in the South. I've lived in the Northwest. I live in Southern California. We don't really have a progressive utopia. Now, full disclaimer, I've never lived in Eugene, Oregon. But as far as I know, there's no progressive utopia in the United States. And here's something that's going on right here in California. This is from the Electronic Frontier Foundation. Shame on Anthony Rendon and Assembly Dems for their collective inaction on starting to close the digital divide. SB 1130 would help millions who lack sufficient broadband connections during the pandemic. So they basically tabled any efforts to start expanding broadband in California when people are without broadband. You guys know that broadband is a topic I talk about a lot on this show. And we talked about that specific, for instance, in Philadelphia, where Comcast had a monopoly and in this area of Philadelphia, and they wanted them to have hotspots so that kids could go to school because we rely on online right now, more so than ever before because of the pandemic. And here they are in California, shelving the digital divide at a time where it's needed the most. Beth, what are your thoughts?
On broadband? So you said first, let me go back to your first point that there are no progressive utopias in America.
Yeah,
and
go for it.
Okay, well, have you heard of a little place called Texas?
I have.
Well, there you go. Cowboys. That's your progressive utopia right there. Actually, now that I'm thinking about Texas, I'm thinking about Austin, which actually could be considered a progressive utopia.
They have
but
yeah, Green New Deal.
Yeah, well, yeah. Is actually, I've lived all over, like you. I've lived all over the United States, and I've lived in Chicago. I've lived in Atlanta. Although I have not lived on the West Coast. I've not lived on the West Coast. Yeah, well, that's one place I need to go. But apparently, you're telling me it sucks there too. So fuck it. Anyway,
this is not a progressive utopia.
No, I'm just being facetious. But yeah, no. I have found that any place I've lived. And I've lived in Europe too. And when I foolishly thought when I lived in the United States, then when I lived in Europe, that would be like a completely different, although, you know, obviously all of Europe is different. I lived in Greece and it was a whole different set of issues. But no, there's no progressive utopia. The town I'm in is a liberal little hotspot in Florida. But even here, it's just, you know, a smaller group of folks that are forward thinking. But as far as California and the broadband issue, that is horrendous. And I remember following a similar story, and I think I was following it through you, that either the head of the Democratic Party in California, help me out. It was that there was somebody who was running who was really progressive, and they completely screwed this person over. Do you remember what I'm talking about? Was it the chairman?
Every single election.
Oh, that happened. You're like, Beth, you have to be more specific.
Be a little more specific than that.
No, it was like a woman who was running, and then they put in the corporate candidate. It was a guy. Fuck it, I don't remember. I just know that when I heard that,
what I think you might be thinking of is Anthony Rendon. That name might sound familiar to you because he was the same person who stabbed single-payer healthcare in the back in California. We had a single-payer bill. He stabbed it in the back, and now he's stabbing another bill in the back to address the digital divide and to increase broadband. So this guy, and by the way, he is a Democrat. We have a complete Democrat stronghold in California. We have a Democratic governor. And yet you have Democrats stabbing these things in the back. And they at one point tried to stab our net neutrality bill in the back. There was so much public outcry, they weren't able to get away with it. And we got a good net neutrality bill through that Jerry Brown signed before he left office. But they tried to even water that down and they failed. So yeah, this is, you'd think progressive policies would be easier when you have a Democratic majority. Nope, it ain't.
Yeah, and that's why I actually have kept up a little bit with California politics, and that's what is so depressing is that it is supposed to be a, a lefty, I don't like to use the word liberal anymore, but it's supposed to be a progressive hotspot in the United States. And you see that the Democratic Party has the entire left or progressives, whatever you want to call it, by the balls out there. And I don't, and that is why, going back to the whole Chris Hedges thing, the whole discussion we're having, really, I don't know what we can get done with these ghouls in charge. And, yeah, I mean, California should absolutely have Medicare for all. And it's the Democratic Party that's stopping it. And the Democratic Party that's stopping the broadband. So what can possibly be done through this structure?
That's the question. That's the big question. And that's why, I mean, that's one of the many reasons why I was happy to attend yesterday, because, I feel like electoral politics is just one tool in the kit of change. And honestly, I think it is often an over-amplified tool. I think we spend too much time on electoral politics, and I'm guilty of this myself. I'm really guilty of this myself in my show. I try to talk a lot about protests and direct action, and we have a direct action thing coming up here. But, as far as the electoral politics part of the toolkit, I think the only way to make that better is with a new party and with a real challenge to the duopoly. And I feel like the time is now. When you kind of look at other times it's happened throughout history, it's been a long time. It's pretty much been since the 1800s. But history does repeat itself eventually. And I say, if not now, when? It's time to build a real party of the people, for the people. And we got to try, because it just ain't working through the duopoly. We've reached a point where John Kasich and Colin Powell are considered part of the alternative to the conservative option. Beth, could you imagine that happening in any other similar democratic experiment in the world, or anything close to it for that matter?
Oh, and I remember the Bush years very well. I lived in Greece during the Bush years, and it got to a point where whenever I would meet, and I had, friends from all over Europe, whenever they would meet me, the first thing they would say to me is, let me tell you why your government is a piece of shit. And all I could sit there and do was, yeah, I agree. I completely agree. They didn't know where I was coming from, if I was a Bush supporter or where I was on the political spectrum. But when they found out that I was in agreement with everything they said, they always felt a lot more comfortable. But yeah, so to see Democrats now embrace the war criminals, and to embrace Bush, and to embrace Colin Powell and John Kasich to a lesser extent, but it's like, excuse me for saying something that's not original at all, but it's like you're taking crazy pills. What the I can't even wrap my head around it. And so
you can say fuck on this show.
Okay, fuck. I said it. Wow, I feel so. It's like I have to get that out every so often, or I'll die. But anyway, yeah, it's nuts. And the fact that, they're painting Trump as uniquely evil, and that's why they can embrace these Republicans, is such an epic scam. It's such a fuck you to the American voter across the spectrum. That the game, it seems to me, is that the Republican Party is just inching closer and closer to, like you said last night, literally electing the hologram of Mussolini. That, we probably will have, Trump Jr. as a Democratic Party, candidate in 20 years from now. And I know that sounds hyperbolic, but really, I could imagine it happening. Could you? I could.
Well, what's crazy? I said, and first of all, thank you for the callback. I really appreciate that a lot. But also, I said this on a more centrist show a little while ago, and kind of getting on the theme you're getting at, where it's like, look, when we keep, we've seen it happen, like from Reagan till now, when you keep like just settling for these terrible candidates, and both parties get more and more corporate because they're owned by the same people. We just shift further and further to the right, to the point where it is now just absolutely absurd. Any situation where John Kasich isn't the most conservative option, that's not any type of democratic experiment. That is an authoritarian theocracy. That's what we live in. We live in an authoritarian theocracy. And I remember I said on this more centrist show, I was like, what is it going to get to? When's it going to stop? Is it going to stop at the point where a Democrat looks like Donald Trump and a Republican is a literal neo-Nazi? They rolled their eyes at me. What has happened since then? This was in about 2017. We had this conversation. What's happened since then? I'll tell you. Mike Bloomberg ran as a Democrat. Someone explained to me the difference between him and Donald Trump politically. I'll wait. Mike Bloomberg ran as a Democrat. Oh, and what happened over in Illinois? An open neo-Nazi ran for Congress.
Yes. Yes. And, you know, the thing is, going back to what you were saying about having a toolbox for all of for everything for political change in this country, you're voting. Electoral politics is just one tiny thing. And I've been, you know, one thing I do, I love history, and I go back and try and read or watch documentaries and just kind of try and center myself in the moment. And I've been revisiting a lot of MLK's actions, particularly in the last few years of his life. And excuse me, it's amazing to me how many people truly don't realize when he was murdered, he was organizing a general strike. You know, most people don't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, he was in the midst of trying to unite poor Americans of all colors, of the working class, like the Rainbow Coalition with Fred Hampton. And it's, you know, I can't blame people. I know that they don't teach this in history classes. It's by design. They don't want a truly educated populace who would understand, you know, historically the labor movements, what's happened. You know, they certainly don't talk about Eugene Debs. And so when I see, like you were saying on this liberal show you were on, that they rolled their eyes at you, what's so, and I don't want to say infuriating anymore, but what's so depressing, I think, is that every 4 years, you know, for me, politics and activism never stops. You're always doing something. You're always talking about something. You're always trying to educate your friends and family and, you know, people you interact with. And the almost incessant need to hold on to this narrative, and to every 4 years, these folks scream about voting for the lesser of two evils. And it seems like I'm talking about a lot about the, you know, kind of centrist Democrat neolibs. They come on, you know, they go onto social media and they scream, vote for the lesser of two evils. You try and talk to people and have a conversation, educate them about this moment in history. And it's almost impossible to get through to people who have allowed themselves to be stuck in this mindset. And so when I talk to people about, you know, a general strike or something that really needs to be done, and again, Chris Hedges mentioned this in his talk last night about civil unrest, and the catalyst for change will be, you know, people in the streets demanding it. And so I think a general strike or something in that vein is also something we need to think about, along with starting a third party. I think we have to use every tool in the toolbox, is what I'm trying to say. And I'm sorry, I kind of rambled on there, but I think we have to use everything at our fingertips, because it's going to be a long, hard battle to get anything that we really need in this country.
I agree with you 110%. And you know, I tweeted this out not too long ago. I don't like stands, you know, like I think it's wrong to stand for a politician. It's, you know, you should criticize them when it's worthy. But the one thing I stand for, well, I stand for two things, STAN. I stand for love. I think love's pretty dope. I think love's great. It's the only thing I believe in. It's the only thing I'll ever believe in. And I stand for a general strike. In my opinion, a general strike, we need it. I'm for it. I stand for it.
All right, my man Ron, standing for the general strike and love. You know, honestly, I think, again, maybe we're related, because those are literally the only two things I think I stand for. Oh, no, cats. Cats, Ron. You don't stand cats?
No, I do.
Okay, well, then that's three things. I got you. You see, you lied, didn't you? You said you only stand two things, but you stand three things, because I think we know how you feel about cats. But yeah, no, seriously, we've got to do a general strike. And it seems like, and how gross was it that Obama came in and put his foot down with the NBA thing. Wow. Is Obama the greatest political disappointment in my lifetime? Man, I feel like a sucker. I can't tell you how many hours I went from door to door with my son in a stroller knocking for Obama. And
Beth, I guarantee you I gave him the benefit of the doubt longer than you did, and there's the video footage to prove it. So, you know, I should be way more embarrassed than almost everyone. I gave him the benefit of the doubt until the very end. I even gave Michelle the benefit of the doubt, and holy shit, was I wrong.
No, I mean, we were all wrong. I mean, it's so fun. I have so many lovely people and, on Twitter saying, I feel so dumb. I was so stupid. And all I can say to people is, yeah, we all got sucked into it. And it's nobody's fault. It's the system. We're being manipulated by the corporate media. We're being manipulated by the party that we thought, I grew up thinking the Democratic Party was on my side. My mom, I grew up Catholic, and
so did I.
All right, my man. But the only pictures on my wall at home, where, in our dining room was like the Pope and John Kennedy, like that. My mom was she volunteered for Kennedy. And so I grew up really hearing in my home, the Democrats are on the side of the worker. The Democrats care about us. The Republicans are, they're the party of the rich and corporate interests, blah, blah, blah. And when you realize, and for me, it was somewhere around 2010, realizing, oh my God, we're being lied to, and I would talk to my friends, and a lot of them, were like, they would not hear it. I'd say, wait a second, but Obama, the Citibank chose his cabinet. He didn't really push for a public option. There are some real red flags here, and we have to talk about this. And, it's hard to, I guess, come out of I don't want to say political coma, but when you start to have a political awakening, you can never go back to sleep. And, and I feel like I'm continuing. Every time I think I'm pretty aware of what's going on, I realize I'm still learning, and I still have so much to grapple with and to understand. And it goes back to the Greeks, Ron. I know that I know nothing. I know that I know nothing, because every time I think I'm sure of something, I'm not. So,
boom.
Boom. Boom.
That's a mic drop moment. That is a mic drop moment.
Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. You can tweet me an article at Ron Placone. We'll go through it together and